Found this X99 based motherboard on Facebook Marketplace for only like $80, which is a great deal considering these normally go for 180 plus. This specific motherboard released August 2014 along with the Haswell E processors. This motherboard was also one of the first to include DDR4 memory on a consumer platform. There are a few different variants of this motherboard. This one is the G1 gaming one, and this one is targeted more towards gamers. Anyway, this motherboard came included with a CPU. This specific CPU is a Core i7-5820K. It comes stock with a base clock of 3.3 GHz but can be turbo boosted up to 3.6. It also has 6 cores and 12 threads thanks to hyperthreading. Overall, in 2024, it's actually not that bad of a CPU. And so yeah, here we are, a technically unplanned video. I figured I already have the motherboard, CPU, and cooler, might as well just build an entire computer out of it and make a video about it, so I decided to set a general budget of around $350 just to see what I can do. Before we continue, have you ever wanted a custom PCB or machining services? Well then today's sponsor PCBWAY is right for you. PCBWAY offers PCB prototyping, assembly, machining, 3D printing, and all of this at like a competitive price. So from December 12th to January 12th, you can grab free Christmas coupons up to $10 and up to 3 prototypes with holiday themed designs. There's also a bunch of sales and a whole bunch of other things. You can check out all the deals and their website in the link below. So yeah, thanks to PCBWAY for sponsoring this video and making it possible. So I started looking around on Facebook Marketplace and I managed to find a reasonable Thermaltake one for only $25. Won't win any awards for design or anything, but it'll definitely do the job and it's within budget. You can also see here that the case has like somewhat decent airflow. It is a giant plastic slab blocking most of the airflow, but it has some airflow. There's a lot more on the top though, which is good. And this case did also come with some RGB fans, but no remote unfortunately. These are up here fans, they're from Amazon, they're like $20. I tried like different remotes and stuff, nothing works. It might just be broken or something like that, I have no idea. But as far as I can tell, there's no way to control the RGB because the motherboard doesn't even have an RGB header. Anyway, moving on to the power supply. So this, I've actually already had this one for a while. It's a 2014 GS700 from Corsair, and it's a 700 watt power supply, and it's old. This I've had since 2019 though, and it's still going strong, and it should be plenty enough to handle what's going in this computer. There is a slightly newer version of this PSU that is like 80 plus gold. I'm not saying this one is, but you know, it's kind of close. Anyway, it is non-modular unfortunately, so there's just a giant mess of cables, and this one just has a lot of them. Like there is so many Molex cables, it's honestly kind of crazy. Luckily, the case does appear to have some room to at least hide some of them. Now moving on to the graphics card, I didn't have much luck on Marketplace, surprisingly, trying to find one. Like anything that there was, like a 1660 I looked for, there was like one for $60 and I messaged, however, the person never responded. I gave them like a week and nothing happened. So I ended up just picking up this GTX 750 Ti. It was only $15, which isn't terrible. It is a Ti card, so it is a little bit overclockable. I did originally buy this for another video because it was advertised as not working, however it just worked perfectly fine when I tested it. Eventually the plan is to upgrade to something like a 1660 because it's much better than a 750, however this card should do like mostly fine at like 720p low or even medium for games like Fortnite and stuff. For storage, I managed to find this Samsung 850 EVO 500GB SSD for only $25. This one was another Facebook Marketplace find. I did think about getting one from Amazon, like a silicone power one from Amazon for like $14, but I figured this one is reliable and it's just known and it would just be better overall. As for the RAM, like the GPU, this was another thing I had a lot of trouble finding or getting people to respond to on Facebook Marketplace. So I ended up just picking up this 16GB 3200MHz T-Force Falcon kit from Amazon. There are plenty of other options for RAM and stuff like this, but I use T-Force for everything and I've never had a problem with them. Overall, with all the parts here now, I think I did really well with the parts selection. The only thing I would really change if I had time was the GPU, as it is a bit lacking when you compare it to everything else that's going in this computer. Alright, so up first is cooling. So this motherboard actually already had the brackets and stuff for the cooler installed, so that's pretty handy. Now it's time for thermal paste. I didn't have anything other than this Cooler Master thermal paste, which will do perfectly fine, but I just like, you know, other options. However, that's the only thing I had for some reason. And the cooler was pretty simple to install. Since it already had the brackets and stuff, it was just, well, pretty straightforward. I just had to align it up and then, you know, screw it down and then simply attach the fans. And just like that, I've got a cooler. And I think this cooler looks really good on this motherboard. I think it complements it nicely. What doesn't look good though is the upside down logo because I installed it upside down and didn't realize until I started editing the video. Next up for installation is the RAM. I would say this is arguably the easiest thing to install on a computer. Now with the RAM installed along with the CPU cooler, this thing is coming along nicely. Now with all of that done, the next step is pretty simple. Just install the motherboard into the case just like so. Of course, you should also install the IO shield along with the motherboard too. Honestly, this computer is coming along quite nicely. You can barely even tell that some of the parts are from 2014. Now for the GPU, as you can see, it is a bit small when you compare it to the motherboard and CPU cooler, so it is looking a little tiny. However, it was $16, so it'll do the job. Installation of this was pretty simple and straightforward. However, what's not going to be that simple is the power supply. As you can see, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there's a lot of cables. And most of these are Molex, so most of them aren't even needed. So fun. And now with everything cable managed, it's honestly looking really good. I would say it's not the best, but you know, it's okay. The back though, specifically the bottom part, is a bit of a mess though because of all the cables. However, I did cable manage the best I could. I did add a bunch of ties and stuff like that. So I think it was, you know, I think it's okay. It's just, as long as you don't look down, it's fine. It's perfectly fine, totally. I would say better than Linus. And so yeah, that's pretty much it for building. And now it's time to test it. I do want to mention that when you first build a computer, usually it's going to be a bit slow because it's configuring everything, so it does take a while on initial boot for it to actually do anything. First game I decided to test was Counter-Strike. Now you will notice that this is not being screen recorded and there's also no FPS counter, and that's because, number one, the screen recorders just did not work. I tried OBS and other things like Screen Rec, they just refused to do anything. And tools like Fraps and MSI Afterburner also just refuse to overlay. I think there might be something wrong with either a configuration in Windows settings or something with like Windows installation. And as you can see in this clip, I am messing with some settings. I have most things set to high, some things set to medium, and as you can see, it is playing, well, okay, as long as I don't die. But now you can see here that it is playing okay. I mean, it's hard to tell on, you know, a recording of a screen, but the FPS I'd say is around 60. It stayed maybe above 60. Sometimes I think it got around like 40, but for the most part, this was a perfectly playable experience. Now, as for Minecraft, this game can run on almost anything, even a potato at this point, so it should be no surprise that this ran perfectly fine. On initial setup of Minecraft, it automatically set everything to the medium settings, and it ran perfectly fine on medium, so I decided to change everything to the highest possible setting, and surprisingly, it still worked perfectly fine. Now, sometimes I do notice that computers do struggle with the highest settings, but this one was perfectly fine. Not test this in the video, but it does struggle with some like ultra-fine mods and stuff like that, like stuff that makes the graphics a lot better. It does struggle with stuff like that. The last but not least on my basic list of testing is Fortnite. This game I would easily say is a lot more demanding than CSGO. Here are the initial Fortnite settings upon first startup, and as you can see, everything is on medium and a bunch of stuff like shadows, global illumination, and reflections are off. So I'm just going to turn all of those on and leave everything mostly medium and just see how well it plays. In the lobby section, it does struggle a little bit with loading in a bunch of people at the same time, but for the most part, it seemed perfectly fine at around 60, maybe even 30 FPS. As for the actual gameplay, as you can see, it's doing perfectly fine, even in like active combat situations like this where the person is jumping around and both people are shooting and there's a bunch of things going on. It was perfectly fine at, I'd say, a stable 60 FPS. There was a few points in the game where it went down a little bit to like, I'd say 30, where it did struggle a little bit, but for the most part, this is a perfectly playable experience. I did also adjust a bunch of settings to high, but I actually forgot to record this, but for the most part, it did actually okay, surprisingly, but it definitely wasn't 60 FPS. It was maybe like 45 or something like that. It was okay. And so yeah, that's it. Overall, for $350, I would say this is a great build. I actually did spend a little less than $350. I'll put the total here on screen, but for the most part, I'd say this is actually a really pretty decent computer. And if you're looking to do something similar, especially with parts from like 2014, I would definitely recommend trying to get a newer graphics card like a 1080 or a 1660. Because as you can see in this video, the 760 actually does surprisingly well with most games, and I could only imagine that a 1660 and a 1080 would do a lot better. So yeah, let me know what you think of this build in the comment section down below and what I should do next. And also a big thanks to PCBWAY again for sponsoring this video. As always, thanks for watching. Definitely subscribe and have a good day or night.